Hello, hello. Welcome back to video 2 in my Plaguetober, that's what it was. Series that I'm doing this particular fall, 2019. The first video that I released was the Wampus video. You can go back and look at that one. That one has a ton of comments in it now, because I asked everyone to leave examples of their own local legends, local monsters, that they felt like were either underrepresented or had just never been heard of before, that sort of thing. And I would make a monster girl out of them, because why not? So to that end, the first one, I'll reiterate, the first one, Wampus, was a local thing for me since I had nothing to go off of in terms of user feedback. That was the first video. This one, I'm going with something called the Boitata, which is from Henrique Roca, I believe. And you'll have to forgive me, my my voice is a little bit sore. I actually finished this one tonight, about an hour ago, actually. And I did it off of a 7 or 6 hour stream or something like that. The entire drawing itself took around probably about 8 or 9 hours, I guess. So my voice is going to be a little bit rough tonight. But let's see. Henrique does say that this is. I'll reiterate some of the lore that I researched afterwards, but he sparked my attention with the idea that this is a fire snake that protects the forest, and that's sort of the gist of it. And he lamented that a lot of his younger friends had not heard of their own local mythologies and things like that. So it'd be nice to be able to have something that sort of reminds people whatnot. Especially, this is my 2 cents, but especially given the whole political things that have been going on in regards to conservation efforts within Portugal and within Brazil. And within Colombia, for that matter, especially Colombia, then it'd be a little bit fitting. So, and as you'll probably see and probably can already tell, there are other reasons why I would pick this particular monster. I decided it would be fitting for me to plagiarize, to plaguify it. And here we're doing construction here, and Kitty. We're doing construction, and it doesn't take me too long to come up with something that is sort of a general premise that I liked in regards to the construction, but it does take me a while to actually finalize it. So, enjoy that. Now, the Boitata, I thought at first, is this a Portugal term? And it sort of is in the sense that it has been adopted. But in researching this, I found out that this is actually a very, very, very old monster. And the word Boitata actually comes from the Tupi branch of languages that still sort of exist within, I think, Paraguay. Still has a lot of them that are still spoken, but there's a lot of them that come from indigenous tribes that existed way before the colonial period started in the Americas. So apparently, presumably, it was first recorded in 1560 by, it's like Joseph of Anchieta or something like that. He recently was within, I think, 1980 actually, he was sainted or something by the Catholic Church. One of their crazy things they do. But it's presumably much older than that. I don't know how old. Could be from beyond the BC era for all I know. Who knows? But it presumably is based off the same thing that will-o-wisps are based out of, which is whenever organic matter decomposes within bodies of water, sometimes the substances that come out of it will oxidize and ionize, and that will cause it to sort of spark, I guess, and creates a luminescence that exists above the lake or the pond or wherever it's happening. So, where we get the idea of wisps from, these glowing balls of light, the same sort of idea existed, presumably in this area, that there was a entity of some sort that was lurking out in the water that had one great glowing eye of some sort. The actual idea behind the monster itself is that it is a fire snake, a gigantic fire snake, and there's several myths regarding it. And it typically is associated with having many different eyes And I think in there's one case of well, it has a lot of different eyes because of the legend surrounding it. And the legend basically goes that, and I think this legend is primarily out of Great Southern River, I think. It's we call it Rio Grande do Sul. That's what it is. And it is essentially that once upon a time, there was a huge flood, and a lot of animals escaped to a cave to escape the floodwaters. And there was a snake within there that had night vision, essentially, and it used its ability to see in the dark to eat its favorite meal, which just so happened to be the eyes of other animals. So it slinked around eating everyone's eyes and essentially blinding them, which they couldn't see in the dark anyways. And after it had finished consuming all of them, the luminescence from eating all their eyes like shone through its body, and it started sprouting eyes from its body all over its skin, and it began to luminesce itself. And this transformed it into the fire snake. But because of its weird-ass diet, it died in the process and revived as this monster, this entity, that exists now to, I guess, patrol the forest and protect it from outsiders and from people that would seek to do it harm, that sort of thing. And there's some other sort of legends associated with it, things like, if you're being pursued by it, it's in your best interest to stay perfectly still, because presumably, it depends on the teller, but presumably it cannot see as a result, like it was blinded by the fact that it consumed all these animals' eyes. So it is covered with eyes and has glowing, piercing vision, but it's actually blind at the same time. And in some other cases, in some other tellings, it actually has amazing vision because lots of eyes. And one in particular, usually the one in the... there's either one in the forehead, which I think there's one variation of this where it's a giant bull that has giant hands and one giant glowing eye. So it's like a cycloptic minotaur in a way. And that's a different variation of this. And that one has just that single glowing red eye. And the snake version, usually it has lots of eyes, but either one of them is in particular glowing, or they're all glowing all the time, and as a result it makes it look like it's one giant eye that's floating out in space, that sort of thing. Lots of variations. So my interpretation of all this information was Snake Woman, first off. But also, if she's going to be a protector of the forest, I thought Buff Snake Woman. Because why not, right? Buff Snake Woman. Buff Snake Woman. So I started doing a bunch of research on... There's a lot of research that goes into things like this. Not just the legend itself, but also like surrounding things like... my idea was big... looks like indigenous woman, very muscular protector, that has flaming hair. Like hair that starts swooping up and like turns into fire. And I think also, I ignited her tail as well because Charmander inspirations, I guess. I don't know. But I thought that it'd be nice to be able to throw in something like that too. As far as the actual outfit and everything goes, that's where probably more of the research came in. I started looking at things like Brazilian women, what they typically look like, what sort of fashion they wear, things like that. And then I had the idea of, well, that's going to be whatever the natives are now. If this is an ancient creature, I would want to reflect more the indigenous people. So I started looking up like local tribes and things like that. And I can't remember their names offhand, but during the course of researching it, I started coming across commonalities with the design of a lot of their outfits. And I don't know what they used to look like, but either they wear next to nothing, or they wear typically like shorts and like a bikini top with some like tattoos or at least paint on their body, as well as a few other like flourishes with minor bits of fabric and things like that. I didn't want it to be as simple as that, so I played up the most visually striking elements that I could find, and came up with this sort of general thing. Instead of going with shorts, I decided to go with something that was more just a wrap, especially concerning the fact that she has a tail. If people actually, oh, by the way, here I decided I don't want to do typical line work, so I started making a new brush. So it'll take me a while to finalize this, but I'm going through and just trying to figure out a way to make my strokes look a little bit more charcoaly in a way without being too overt. Because I was getting tired of the fact that everything either looked too soft or was too harsh. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to make a new brush. So enjoy that, I guess. If you ever wonder about my brush settings, they're right there in every video. All you have to do is just look over to the side and just look at what the settings for my side tool stuff happens to be. But the clothing, yeah. The top and the sort of the bottom were not too difficult. I decided that since that was sort of bare bones in terms of what the indigenous people seemed to wear, I decided to go more the route of just going with more detailing. So I focused a lot more on like body paint and making sure that she looks distinct in that manner. And I was thinking about what would a fire snake person actually wear? And I was thinking probably both, like being celebrated as a local god, both something to glorify it, but also something that is like trophies from kills and things of that nature. And in the original draft of this, I was thinking more about things like having a bracelet made of teeth or something like that. But I sort of toned that down after a while, because I kind of got the impression drawing it this like I'm going to get really crazy in my detail work, and I'm going to drive myself absolutely insane trying to do this. So I decided not to go that route. I still ended up going way too detailed focus though in the end. But in terms of the actual monster, really actually talk about this quickly. In analyzing the responses, a lot of people, the more that I look at a lot of these responses, and I've thought about this in the past, but a lot of monsters in the past were just, you know, it's this animal combined with this animal. Like it's half bird, half lion or something. Or it's half a snake, half a person, half a scorpion, half a river otter or something. You know, just whatever. There's a lot of that. And there's also a lot of, it's this animal I saw, except it's really, really big. So whenever I'm going through and coming up with like monster ideas, it can be difficult to find one that's really actually captivating, just because so many monsters are not really that imaginative. And you can understand why they would exist. If someone sees like a particularly large like snake one time, of course they're going to develop some sort of like, it's going to be considered a god because it's just this massive snake, right? So it makes perfect sense. And the idea of someone just slamming two monsters together and going, wouldn't it be crazy if this bird was also like the devil or something, and also it has a helicopter on top of it? It just you can see why people would just make up all sorts of weird, random, crazy shit, especially back in the day when it's not as though they were concerned about, well, I saw that in a movie recently. I can't do that. Like, there's a lot of that now. These days, people are sort of forced to be more creative because we've gotten to where everyone has seen everything. So our ideas are becoming increasingly, like, culturally, becoming way more bizarre and more nuanced, and it kind of gets to where it's either really easy to describe modern monsters or it's very difficult. Like Cthulhu, for example, might be very difficult to explain in some ways because you can't say, well, it's just it's a giant squid. It's Cthulhu is not really a giant squid. In fact, Cthulhu doesn't really have anything that is like describable. And that's kind of the whole appeal of Lovecraftian stuff, is that you can't really describe what it is exactly. It's an unknown horror. But whenever it comes to like these older things, just giant snake, whatever. Or some other things, like a lot of modern ghosts are getting to where it's just a lady. She's a particularly angry lady, and she has black hair, but she looks real weird. And that's it. It seems like monsters are getting to where they're either absurd or they're just incredibly boring. Like, there's just nothing to them. So, whenever I'm looking for these monster ideas, typically I'm looking for one that can translate into any number of things. Like with the Boitata here. Sure, it's just a fire snake, but the fact that, one, fire, like it's made out of fire, it has a bunch of different eyes, and there is also other interpretations of it being possibly a bull or having giant hands and things. So I thought, oh, that'd be interesting. Whenever I was actually designing it from that perspective of it being a snake, I started looking up what are the most dangerous snakes in the area. Like, what would be the most... like, I didn't want to go just the obvious route. Boa constrictor, big snake. Like, this kind of boring. I decided to look up more, like, the most venomous snakes in the area. I forget what it is exactly. It's a yellow something or other, but it has these... it's one of those snakes that has these horny protrusions on its head. And in that case, it was completely yellow as well. So, in regards to her face, that's the reason why she has that. I was thinking up, what things can I do to make her look more viper-like without taking too much away from the fact that it's just a snake lady? And by the way, the little tattoo pattern that I have on her leg is a real pattern that I saw whenever I was doing research. It was, I think, on one lady in particular. It's not like something that is well known, I guess. It's not something that is a cultural thing. But it did get me thinking, well, it's sort of scale-like. That diamond pattern that also has the circular eye sort of shape inside of it. I thought that's fitting for this kind of character. So that's the reason why I went with this diamond, almost scale pattern that has those eyes in the middle. Oh, my voice is really killing me. Trying to... Anytime that I do some sort of monster that happens to have a tail, the thing about tails is that they are extensions of the spine. And humans specifically, of course, we don't have tails anymore. The bit that used to be the tail curls up, and I think I mentioned this before. It sort of curls inward to the body, and that attaches like muscles and stuff to things like the buttocks and whatnot. And if we didn't have a tailbone, then our bodies just would not be able to function. But if we did have a tail, then, and a lot of people doing anime drawings get this wrong all the time, but if we did have a tail, they most certainly would not extend out of, like, the lower back. I don't know why people draw it there, but it wouldn't come out of the lower back and just be like an extra tailbone that we have. you would have to take the existing tail and like make sure that it comes out the same place that it always comes out. You would have to sort of pull it back so that it doesn't curl inward. So technically, our body would not be able to work that way. But then again, if monsters have 4 arms, that wouldn't be able to work either. So whatever. But whenever I'm drawing these tails, you sort of have to draw them where they're almost pointing straight at the ground because we're an upright species. And as a result, there's not much you can really do with the tail. Especially if I'm doing what I'm doing here and drawing it as this big, thick appendage. You can't put on pants if you have a giant tail like that. Can't wear pants. No pants. So I'm cheating a lot there. That's one of the reasons why I drew that little back. I don't know what they call these. But whenever you sort of wear like a little cape around your waist, whether it's in the front or the back, I don't know. I think there's like an old armory term for it, but it's technically for a piece of armor, so it doesn't really matter. But I thought, well, if she was actually wearing something, she would probably be wearing like a wrap that also, if you actually look close enough, would be more similar to like chaps, I guess. So as a result, she would have to wear something that also covered the back of her tail, so you can't see her sweet goodies from the back end. Don't want that, do we? No. So that's part of where I came up with the design for her clothing. Is I was trying to workshop that. There was a Batgirl design that I did a couple years ago or 3 years ago, and that one, because of actually I may have done a video on that. I can't remember. It was inside of a video, I think. And here I start on with her hair going crazy and turning into fire. That's what I'm doing here. But with bats, of course, they have, that membrane that stretches from, like their wings are actually really, really long fingers, which is kind of creepy to think about. But they have very, very long, like, whatever they're called, tarsals. And the skin from like their fingers. Like if you look at your own hands, you have like little bits of skin that are in between your fingers if you look just right. It'd be like if your fingers were like really, really long to the point they were the size of like wings. And the skin that's from your, probably, I guess your pinky that goes down to like your hand. It would be if that skin was stretched so that it goes from your pinky all the way down to your legs. Because that's, how bats fly. They have to have that, or else they can't glide. So imagine trying to put on pants if you had a body like that. You just had this really long skin, and you can't cover it up or anything. So it's like, how in the world could a Batgirl, in this case, wear clothing like that? And so what I ended up having to do is make this really perverse looking, like, Y pullover thing, where it just goes from the crotch, because that's the only part that doesn't have that weird skin there. And it like fixes like goes over the chest as well, and then the straps go on the shoulders. And it is a mess for that reason. So the same logic applies with the tail. If you got a big long tail, you got to think about how exactly does this character actually wear any of this stuff. And the answer really is they wouldn't be able to. The only thing that you could really do is, specifically with a tail, you could do like a dress to where technically they don't have to worry about it. But even I guess you could cut a hole in the back of the dress so that the tail has something to emerge from. This still doesn't solve the problem, but at least you're covering absolutely everything. Or you could like wear some sort of shorts or something that that sort of functions almost like a jock strap in a way, I guess, would be the way to do it. Where it's sort of like if you have the tail, like you have a tail, right? You pull it up like you would pants, except there's a big long sort of V shape in the back, and there you could like have a button to where you button the two pieces together once it's up to the point where you can actually fasten it around your tail. But that would probably be really uncomfortable. So I guess you could also do sort of that jock strap thing where it's something that you pull up and you sort of fasten it together like on the sides, like on the hip or something. I guess that's one way of doing it. I don't know. I guess what I'm getting at is humans are really well off to wear clothing. Like, it's a good thing that we have the body shape that we do. And here I'm doing these little tattoo things here. This one actually turns out pretty well. I think of all the ones that I did in this particular little ensemble, this was my favorite one. Excuse me for a second. My voice is being destroyed right now. Like I said, I stream for 6 or 7 hours, so my voice is just pretty much gone at this point. But I really wanted to make sure that I had this up tomorrow, so I couldn't fart around and wait. Now, in my last video, in my last video, I had a lot of problems in regards to the background. And at that one, my original plan was, I'm not going to draw a background, I'll just do some loose stuff, and then after that I will like do some wild gestural stuff with color. And every video that I do for you guys, I'm always like failing. I'm like, you guys probably see more of my failures than you do my successes, because that's really the point of the videos. As I've mentioned before, whenever I'm making these things, I work better whenever I know that I'm not being watched, because I always feel like I'm in a hurry. So whenever I'm recording myself, or whenever I'm recording myself via like stream, like it's live stream, I have the same issue. And it's always, I can't step away from the computer and just think about what I'm doing, or like my entire process gets interrupted. So typically whenever you're seeing anything that I do in regards to my like art gripe stuff, or like this series that I'm doing, it's always my worst failures. And it's always the things that I'm experimenting the most with at the same time, which is kind of dangerous, but whatever. So in that last video, for example, that's what I was doing. I was experimenting with, well, maybe I can get away with doing it this way, and it'll save time. And even whenever I was doing it, I thought, well, this is not actually going to work. This surely cannot work. Because I was doing the whole background, color only, no real focus on line work. And I knew whenever I was drawing it, this is not going to work, because one, I'm not used to doing it. And two, ignoring that, this is going to conflict with the foreground. And I'm not going to rehash all that discussion. But just at the time, I knew everything about this was not going to really fit the way that I wanted it to. It ended up being, believe it or not, it ended up being better than what I thought it was going to be. But it ended up being just as bad as I thought that it would also be. Like, it had all the failings that I figured that it would have. So with this one, I decided to circumvent that by going another route. Instead of all color, focusing, like trying to make it gestural, and then forgetting halfway through. Like, part of it is that I was fighting myself. I have a natural tendency to want to I have a natural tendency to want to I want to detail things a little bit too much, because that's how I used to draw whenever I only drew with mechanical pencils and whatnot. You had no color, or like the best you could do is like thatching or something. So as a result, I was very detail oriented, and that's how I started drawing. So in regards to like even today, I'm still very detail oriented instead of being color oriented. So I'm not a painter by any stretch of the imagination, and what I was trying to do was painting. That's what actually that would have been. But I don't have experience doing it, and I have no business trying to do it, especially whenever I was doing something detail oriented in front of it. So this one I decided, you know what? I'll flip that and do the exact opposite thing, because I've done this before. I will instead do some gestural lines in the background to imply that something is there, and then do some really, really loose color that's almost, it's not even really there. Like it's just sort of there, and that's it. So it'll be mostly white, is what my actual plan was. My original thought was I'll do color surrounding her, but as you go further out to the edges, it'll be more incomplete, and it'll just turn into like draft pencil drawings once I get too far out. And my actual original idea for this drawing was to have her be in a more like angry, vengeful pose, where she was looking out and seeing like chopped down trees or the forest on fire or something, and that would be pissing her off, right? But as I thought more about this background issue, I thought, well, if I do that, then I would have to detail the background, and I would fall into the same trap that I always fall into. So I decided, you know what? I'm not going to do that. So I had to change her pose and expression to fit. So as a result, now it's just looking ahead, and that's the end of it. And by the way, does it make sense to you guys that the protector of the forest that hates having the forest set on fire is a snake that is made out of fire? Like, I get the actual... like, the legend itself stems from these balls of light that would float above the surface of water, right? And I guess the natives thought it's probably related to those giant-ass snakes that we see from time to time. So as a result, the two got conflated, and there wasn't really supposed to be that much logic to it. Just, there is a big snake made of, like, magic fire. And don't you fuck around with the forest too much. Because that's... a lot of, like, religion or myths and stuff often get conflated as well with what the rulers wanted their people to do at the time. Like, you should have proper behavior. You should have proper behavior, or else God or the devil or this monster will come and get you if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing. So maybe it had something to do with that. Maybe the whole Boitata thing is just sort of a political agenda that just so happened to overlap with the myth itself. Maybe that's what was going on. Who knows? Who knows? It might be in the whole aspect of it being conservative, like conservationism, that sort of thing. That could also just be like a modern creation. I don't actually know. It'd be interesting to try to track that information down, but I just don't have enough information to actually consider it. One thing I forgot to do, in this drawing, I never shaded the hair. I completely forgot about that. Oh well. What's done is done. By the time I get to the final bit of the drawing much later on, I actually was at the time thinking, I could do this, I could do that. I could zoom in and go even more detail-oriented. But I thought, no, I'm trying to get as many of these done as I possibly can. And that's not going to be conducive to that. Plus, if I fall into the trap of over-detailing again, I'm just going to create problems. So you see what I'm doing with the background here. This is what I meant. I decided to just do this. I think I was streaming this, one person in my chat described this as being reminiscent of Winnie the Pooh because of the like sort of the loose, like almost sort of crayon sort of look to it, which I've always liked this look. This is the reason why I decided to go this route. But one thing to note here is that I have to keep it very bright and desaturated because it's meant to blend in with the whites. If I made it too hard, if I made the colors too vibrant, then it would really contrast too much with the local like white values on the back of the canvas. So as a result, like to try to make sure that everything stays sort of faded together like that, it's also conflicting with the foreground. So I knew even whenever I started work on my coloring here, either I'm going to have to change the background to have more depth to it, which I knew I didn't want to do, or I was going to have to desaturate the foreground a little bit, which is what I ended up doing. So whenever we get to the very, very, very end, that's what I end up doing, just desaturating it at the very last second. Now that I realized I never actually shaded it, it's kind of fitting that it isn't shaded, because even if I did add any shading to it, because there's that fire on top of it, I wouldn't actually be able to do much of anything with it. And if I did, there would be a little bit of shading like near the bottom, but that's pretty much it. So I guess I'm not missing out on too much. There's always some weird little thing like that, where I forget one layer in particular. There's one color portion in particular that I forgot. And usually it's something incredibly minor, because, you know, I didn't notice it, so it has to be minor. But oh well, it's going to bother me the rest of the drawing. Nothing matters. My voice is so gone at this point anyways that you probably, if I had something to say about it, you wouldn't be able to even hear me say it. It's always interesting to me to look at other local legends, like I mentioned it before. But it's always interesting to hear other local legends and see where they sort of overlap with one another. Because I also noticed a few other legends that sort of had similar aspects to them. Yeah. Another user, actually, Alex Dien, I think, left a message talking about Mama Glow or Mama Delo, which is, I don't know where that's from exactly. I think it's actually Trinidad. So Wooly might recognize this, I don't know. But the myth is a tall, beautiful woman that has like golden hair and has the lower body of a snake. So essentially a labia, basically. But it has that same sort of myth of she's a guardian, protector of the forest, of like wildlife, I think specifically rivers in this case. And she goes out and punishes hunters for overfishing and things of that nature. She's said to be married to another folklore being, Papa... What is this? Papa Boys? Oh, Boa. Papa Boy. Okay. So I read that after reading this one. And it kind of made me think, I wonder if those two are actually related in some way. Like if there's some sort of original legend that was even older than both of these, or like one came before the other, but it found its way like over the islands, just somehow it got over the Caribbean, and here we are nearly done, and found its way there. I've always been really interested in that. The thing about ideas is that they're always iterative. Like people see things and they try to replicate them and add their own spin to them, and it's always interesting to see the results. Like even my own like creations, like the Scary Lessons thing was originally very, very loosely based off of various things, like Saiyan women from Dragon Ball Z and the Ghoul School and things of that nature. So don't be afraid to like just take existing things and just make your own weird spin on them. You're not going to hurt anyone. You might end up with something that's really cool as a result. So here we have the end result. There you go. Another part of my problem in the previous video was going 1920 1080 on widescreen, and the pose that I put her in wasn't really fitting for it. So in this case, I actually started with a pose that I liked, and then I thought, oh, this actually does fit 1920, but only if you're using like a cell phone or something. So, cell phone drawing. There you go. Don't say I never gave you kids anything, you horrible, horrible cell phone wielding trolls. So there you are. Boitata. There she is. In all her fiery glory. So again, continue leaving your ideas in the comment section. I have a backlog of them now. I can't get to all of them. A lot of you guys had really good ideas, but I won't be able to get to all these things. I'm trying to get to international things, because sure, America's great. Yay, America. Yay, USA. But other people have other things to add as well. And it's interesting to hear what everyone has overseas. So continue leaving your local legends in the comment section below, and I'll look at those and see if anything's cool, anything sticks. Got quite a few in the pipeline, though. I won't be able to get to probably any more than like 3 of them at most during this month, but it is what it is, I suppose. I lament the fact that I can't get to all of them. I actually do, because I love making stuff like this, but maybe I could do like a batch of sometime. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. All right. Thanks for enduring my no voice recording this time around, guys. See you this time next week or the week after that. Happy Plaguetober.